Okay, so today we're going deep into Indian literature,
Okay.
written in English.
Yeah.
And I think this will be really interesting, especially given your interest in, all the different aspects of India.
Right.
And, we're looking at it through the lens of the Booker Prize.
Mm.
And you had sent an article
Mm-hmm.
about, why certain Indian authors writing in English
Yeah.
have kind of gotten this global recognition.
Mm-hmm.
So I think our mission today is to unpack that.
Okay.
And see, what makes these books and these authors so impactful. And we're going to be focusing on 4 authors and their winning novels.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie,
Yeah.
God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy,
Okay.
Kiran Desai's The Inheritance of Loss,
Mm-hmm.
and The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga.
Okay.
Now, these weren't just any books.
Right.
They were recognized as being, really original and powerful
Yeah.
and giving readers these profound perspectives on India.
Right.
So I guess a good place to start would be with Midnight's Children.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
It seems like it's one of the more impactful ones.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about it is how Rushdie kind of blends together actual history and then this magical realism aspect.
Yep.
And the article talked about, how the judges were really kind of drawn to that.
Yeah.
And, it's also just really interesting how that, blending of the real and the kind of magical
Good.
allows him to, explore these themes of like identity and freedom,
Yeah.
especially in the context of India's independence and the partition.
Right. And the story focuses on Salim Sinai.
Okay.
And he's born at the precise moment of India's independence
Wow.
in 1947. And it takes this really interesting turn because he develops powers
Mm-hmm.
that link him to all the other children that were born at the same time.
Okay.
This is a pretty wild premise.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea.
But it's a compelling story.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think that, that connection is really key because it's not just like a quirky plot device,
Yeah.
It allows Rushdie to really like weave Salim's own personal journey
Right.
with the larger narrative of India's post-independence trajectory.
Yeah.
The magical elements, as you said, they seem fantastical.
Right.
But they work as like a powerful metaphor
Oh,
for, the interconnectedness of like the nation and the shared experiences of its people.
Yeah.
It makes you think about history in a very unconventional way.
It really does.
Yeah.
And, Rushdie himself, he is British Indian.
Okay.
And he spent part of his life in India and then moved abroad.
Okay.
So it seems natural that his
Yeah.
background would really inform, these ideas of identity and culture
Mm-hmm.
that he explores in his work, and he really draws on India's past
Yeah.
and myths and legends.
Real.
And then he kind of reimagines them through this fantastical lens,
Yeah.
which, as the article suggests, really inspires readers to see the world in new ways.
Right.
So for you listening, this book, it gives you this kind of dreamlike but very insightful perspective on this really pivotal period in Indian history.
Yeah.
That transition to independence and the partition,
Mm-hmm.
and it deals with these very complex notions
Yeah.
of, what does it mean to have a national identity,
Right.
but also a personal identity.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And that interplay between the individual and the collective,
Yeah.
the factual and the fantastical.
Yeah.
That's what makes Midnight's Children so groundbreaking and gives it this lasting relevance.
Right. It really challenges the way we traditionally think of history.
Absolutely.
So let's move on now to The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy.
Okay.
And the article pointed out that this novel won for its beauty of writing
Yeah.
and its emotional storytelling. It really focuses on the struggles of a family in the state of Kerala,
Right.
and it deals with love loss and social inequalities, like the
Yeah.
caste system.
Right. So for those who might not know, the caste system is
Yeah.
basically a hierarchical system
Yeah.
of social stratification that's, historically been a part of Indian society.
Right, a big part.
A big part, yeah.
Yeah.
And what really captivated the Booker judges
Yeah.
was her use of language
Right.
and how she uses this, incredibly poetic language.
Hmm. Even when she's dealing with really, difficult and painful subjects.
Yeah.
And the message that the judges, really honed in on was how these societal structures and individual tragedies kind of intertwine
Right.
and shape
Yeah.
lives in very significant ways.
Yeah. The story is set in Kerala
Okay.
and revolves around these twins, Rahel and Esta, and their family, and it moves back and forth between the past and the present.
Okay.
And really emphasizes how these small, almost fleeting moments
Yeah.
can actually reveal these huge emotions and
Right.
expose these societal issues like forbidden love and the unfair treatment that stems from the caste system.
Yeah.
And her writing is, it's not just descriptive, it's evocative.
Yeah. It creates this narrative that feels very melancholic, but also really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
And, Roy herself is an Indian writer and an activist.
Right.
And she grew up in Kerala.
Okay.
So the article suggested that her novel really reflects her life there.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And her writing is really influenced by her activism and her concern for ordinary people.
Yeah.
She uses words to, both highlight the beauty in everyday life, but also to challenge,
Right.
those societal wrongs that she sees.
So for you listening, this novel gives you a really intimate look at the impact of social structures on lives within a very specific cultural context in India. It shows the power of storytelling, especially when it's done with such evocative and poetic language.
Right.
You can almost feel the weight of these experiences as you read.
Yeah, you really get a sense of how these things intertwine, the personal and the political, and how even, small stories can illuminate these really big societal issues.
Yeah. And our next book is Kiran Desai's The Inheritance of Loss.
Okay.
And according to the article, it won the Booker for its exploration of globalization and migration and how it impacts people's lives.
Yeah.
And the story takes place in both India and America,
Interesting.
connecting these personal stories with these global themes.
Okay.
What's really striking about The Inheritance of Loss is how Desai really captures that feeling of displacement that people experience, when they're moving between cultures.
Yeah.
And the judges praised her rich descriptions that bring both, the Himalayas and America to life. And they also really appreciated the thoughtful ideas about, belonging and identity in this globalized world.
Right.
So the story unfolds in two settings primarily.
Okay.
We have the Himalayas, where we meet a retired judge and his granddaughter, Sai. And then we have New York,
Okay.
where we follow Biju,
Yeah.
a young man who's dealing with immigrant life.
Right.
And the novel illustrates, this feeling of being adrift
Yeah.
and not fully belonging to either place. And it really delves into how global shifts affect individuals in these really personal ways.
Right.
And Desai herself is an Indian-American writer
Okay.
and the daughter of author Anita Desai.
Oh, wow.
And she's lived in both India and the U.S.
Yeah.
And her experiences of, moving between these places really inform the novel.
Right.
The article pointed out that it offers this really nuanced understanding of what it means to belong to multiple worlds.
Yeah.
Or maybe to feel like you don't belong to any time.
Right. Right.
So for you, this exploration of the inheritance of loss illuminates these very real contemporary issues of globalization and migration and their effects on our own sense of identity and belonging in these, increasingly diverse cultural landscapes.
It makes you really think about what home means.
Yeah.
In a world where everyone's moving around and cultures are mixing.
Right. And the last book we're going to talk about is The White Tiger
Okay.
by Aravind Adiga.
Yeah.
And this one won for its bold and honest portrayal of India's class divisions and corruption.
Right.
It follows a poor man's journey to success.
Okay.
And it's told through letters.
Interesting.
So the judges were really impressed by Adiga's writing style,
Yeah.
which is very sharp, often satirical,
Right.
and really honest. He's not afraid to tackle these difficult issues of inequality and social mobility.
Yeah. It sounds like a book that, doesn't shy away from the difficult stuff.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't.
Yeah.
So the story is told through letters written by Balram Halway,
Okay.
who starts out in a poor village and becomes a driver for a wealthy family.
Okay.
He describes his, rise out of poverty.
Yeah.
And he's very open about how he's willing to break the rules and kind of bend societal norms to achieve his ambitions.
Yeah.
It's a really dark, but also humorous take on inequality in modern India.
Interesting.
And Adiga himself is an Indian-Australian writer
Okay.
and a former journalist, and he reported on issues like poverty and corruption in India.
So that all ties in, though.
Yeah, it does his firsthand observations really shape this novel.
Right.
His writing is very incisive and witty, but also very serious.
Yeah.
And it forces readers to confront these harsh realities faced by, people on the margins of Indian society.
Yeah.
So for you, this novel offers a raw look at socioeconomic disparities and the complexities of ambition and morality in contemporary India.
Yeah.
It really makes you think critically about the structures of society.
It makes you question, these dominant narratives we have about progress and development and whose voices are actually being heard and whose are being left out.
So we've talked about all four of these books.
Yeah.
And the article also touched on their significance.
Right.
I think not just for people studying India, but for anyone, really.
For sure.
So these novels, they give us all these insights into India's history.
Right.
Midnight's Children shows us that moment of independence. The White Tiger shows us the challenges of inequality. And we also get to see different regional experiences.
Right.
The cultural context of Kerala and the God of Small Things and the Himalayas and the inheritance of loss.
Exactly.
And beyond the Indian context, they explore these universal human themes like identity and belonging and not belonging.
Yeah, that feeling of being an outsider.
Yeah, and I think anyone anywhere can relate to that.
Absolutely.
And each of these authors has this really distinctive writing style.
Yeah.
We've got Rushdie's magic realism, Roy's poetic prose, Desai's detailed descriptions, and Adiga's sharp wit.
Yeah, it's like a masterclass in storytelling.
Yeah, it is.
And how to convey meaning through writing.
Yeah, and it's important to note that these personal stories are often connected to these bigger global events.
Right.
Like migration and economic changes.
Yeah.
And these novels help us see how those things can impact individual lives. And the fact that these authors have all won the Booker Prize shows how important Indian literature in English is becoming. It's it makes people proud. And it shows that Indian voices are important on the global stage.
Right.
They offer these really unique perspectives.
Absolutely.
So to kind of wrap up our deep dive today, we've seen that these Booker Prize winning novels offer these amazing perspectives on India. They blend history, social commentary, personal stories, and these really unique writing styles.
Yeah.
And they resonate with people all over the world because they deal with these universal human experiences while also being rooted in this specific context of India.
Exactly. And I think for you, this exploration has been, a great way to get a deeper understanding of these works and how much impact they have. It's like a shortcut to becoming more knowledgeable about contemporary Indian literature and its place in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And one last thought for you as you're going about your day.
Okay.
Think about how the themes in these novels, like identity and inequality and the clash between tradition and modernity, how those themes are still shaping India and the world we live in.
Absolutely.
And what other stories might give us these powerful insights into our globalized world?
That's a great question to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's something to think about.
It is.